Welcome to the Salt Strong Fishing Podcast. Salt Strong has been helping saltwater anglers catch more fish in less time for 10 years and is now the largest and most trusted saltwater fishing community in America. If you want to catch more saltwater fish, then keep listening. If you want to speed up your fish catching results even faster, then join the private insider community at saltstrong.com. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
Hello, Salt Strong Nation. Joe Simons, like diamonds.
Hey, Luke Simons.
Like diamonds. Talk about night fishing. So if you don't know, we have a new course. We have a lot of mastery courses. We're getting close to 30 now on everything you can possibly imagine. And one that we have not covered in depth is night fishing. It's obviously something's been going on a long time. It doesn't get a lot of attention. I think a lot of videos don't focus on it because it is tough to even get good video footage. And we found that out doing it that evening. We brought a couple of different cameras and kind of finally dialed it in because obviously you want to be able to see what you're doing. And we've been working with Peter Deeks on this for a big chunk of this year. He's been going out and filming a bunch of stuff on nights when he's available. And to me, it's a great way, especially if you're busy or if you got kids or grandkids or whatever. It's one of those times when everyone goes to sleep, you go out there. And doggone it, Luke, we're going to talk about this in a second. We just got back from night fishing evening, a little rendezvous, and crushed it. And we saw a couple boats the entire 6 hours we're out there. There's just no pressure. Fish are fired up. They're hungry. It's dinner time. It was really, really nice to be out there. And of course, it was nice and cool and it wasn't crazy hot. So let's talk about night fishing. Luke, what were some of the big takeaways you learned this week?
Yeah, number one is it's so much less pressure because we were fishing a lot of just like basically right near like main channels, and I don't know if we even like any boats passed us, maybe one like the entire evening. So it's just that there's a lot less pressure, which means the fish aren't as stressed out, which means they're more likely to eat. And that's usually the case. So we were out. This was I can't remember exactly what the tidal flow was, but it was we're in between the moons, and the pressure was really high. So it was like a really high pressure, and it was stable, which typically doesn't allow for a good bite. So the conditions were really not that favorable. But in spite of that, we caught a good amount of fish and had a lot of action, both with lures and with live bait. So it was definitely a very fun evening with a lot of action involved.
Yep. And one of the spots where the biggest fish was caught, the only other people we saw were people fishing from land. So we were at some bridges. We went to some docks. We'll talk about the where here in just a second. So the good news is you don't have to have a boat or a kayak to do it. That was really the only other people we saw fishing in the entire night were those people fishing on shore that were kind of casting over similar to where we're fishing. So I'd say first and foremost, you need light, right? You need structure and light. I mean, all the places we caught fish had some sort of light source nearby.
So yes, but the biggest fish was on a zone that wasn't lit. So the light is helpful, but it's not a requirement. Basically, if you have current flow and structure, there's going to be fish there, and if you get something in front of their face, they're going to eat it.
But that was one out of, let's just say, 40 fish that were caught. The rest were all caught where there was areas that did have some light. So if we're talking about just catching a lot of fish, which is the goal for most people, a bunch of tie lines, and even the guide who was with us, we'll name his name the Mad Snooker. The guy only fishes an item. That's one of his criteria is, all right, I want moving water, and I want to find either a dock or a bridge or some structure that has some light coming off of it. We started with the docks. Let's kind of talk about where we started. We just started with a little residential dock. Wasn't too far away from a lot of moving water.
Yeah, it was all about structure and current flow, ideally with some light. And when we had that combination, there was usually some fish. And just like normal inshore fishing, not all of the lit docks had fish. So not all of like the really good looking spots will hold fish, but like the first spot we pulled up to, we get to it, and it's this dock with a bunch of lights shining down, like they actually shining down on the water for like 4 fish. and there were snook all, you could look down, there's a ton of snook. And so we immediately got into a bunch of action. What was surprising is how many trout were in there as well. I'm not used to getting trout on lights that are in snook territory, because snook are pretty dominant. And it seems like a lot of times they kind of push the trout out, but we caught more trout than snook. We caught both, but maybe, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 trout and 5 or 6 snook ratio, something like that.
Yeah, and these were all keeper trout. They were solid looking trout. What was interesting, though, like all the snook were caught for the most part really close and tight to the structure. She had to make either a perfect cast or even a skip cast. And then once you kind of got past that, like coming back towards the boat, because we'll talk about positioning in a second as well. That's when all the trout were hitting, and it was like every cast. It was nuts.
Yeah, and so what we did, I'm stubborn. I just love fishing lures, and especially I'm not going to be keeping the fish. I'd rather catch them with a lure just for the extra challenge. Joe was fishing live bait the whole time. So Joe was using live shrimp the whole time. I was using fake shrimp the whole time. I was using this right here. This is the Prawn USA Junior on a 1/4 ounce jig head. And I started out, I was catching the most fish. So like when the conditions were really good, the lures were catching the most. And I was concentrating on the bottom, whereas Joe was concentrating more on the top. He was freelining shrimp. That's what gets the most pressure. When I'm throwing lures under lights, I like getting it down to the bottom. Most people are going after the fish you can see because you can see them. But when there's a light shining down, there's going to be fish on the bottom as well. And there's a lot of feeding going on down there, and not many people target them. So the less pressured fish are going to be ones on the bottom. And having a prawn junior like this bouncing right in their face, this is by far my most trusted lure fishing around docks during the wintertime. A little small shrimp, and they smack it. And the benefit of the reason I was catching more is because the fish were active, and I was able to just go through. I wasn't having to waste time re-rigging the shrimp or doing anything. As soon as my lure is back, I flop it back out there, but once the current flow died down, the lure bite totally was gone, and the live shrimp still worked. But and then we fished the back end, the other side of the tide, and then it kind of happened again. But for a while there, Joe was catching the most fish by far with the live shrimp,
and it felt good. So let's talk about how we position, because it was definitely different, right? We're used to going out with a trolling motor, and the irony is the Mad Snooker owns a trolling motor and purposely doesn't even put it on there. He just gets in the way. Talk about that. That was pretty interesting how we positioned up with the anchor and just kind of sat there and just whack these fish.
Yeah, I mean the trolling motor is incredibly helpful. It's just helpful for maneuvering around. But when you know exactly where the fish are going to be and when they're going to be there, then stealth becomes the bigger priority. And there's nothing more quiet than actually anchoring down where there's no mechanical movements at all. So the Mad Snooker, he knew that dock was going to be good. He literally shut the big motor down well ahead of time, knowing what the current and the wind were doing, and got the perfect drift. Like he was precision at
He's got it dialed in.
So like the normal weekend warrior would not be able to anchor like that. So he had everything dialed in, and he would put the anchor down super quietly, like literally not moving, like not making any movement on the boat as he maneuvered around, not letting the chain hit, make a bunch of noise. Stealth, just watching him, he was doing everything slowly with the intention of making as little noise as possible. A lot of people will get now that we have all these fancy trolling motors, you can really click a button and the spot lock will keep it right in position. That's cool and all, but that motor, first of all, that the blade is turning, the motor's pivoting around. And a lot of these fish in the more populated areas, they're not smart, but they're also not stupid. And they can definitely feel and they can feel that vibration. And over time, they'll eventually put two and two together. When they can feel that vibration, their mouths are hurting when they're eating, and they don't bite as much. So like it pretty much every time when we pulled up to it, we saw some fish, but then as soon as we just sat quietly for like 5 minutes, then they all lifted back up, and the lights were just loaded in some cases. It's really cool to see.
It was cool. Hey, we got some great footage on that. But yeah, that was the stealth part of it. He said, especially on a tough day, and that's probably why most weekend warriors get skunked. Because had we gone to that same spot with a trolling motor and been just normal loud, meaning like occasionally drop pliers on the ground or whatever, those fish never would have come up. You're right. It wasn't until we literally just sat there. We didn't even fish for a couple minutes. And we just kind of sat there, no movement, nothing turned on. He even turns his live well off. So we had live shrimp. He turns his live well off. He's like, dude, every one of those things make sound that are just pulsing through the water. He's like, I have nothing. So he brings his own little bubblers that he puts inside to make sure there is literally no noise coming from his boat. It was pretty cool. He's like, what do you call it? Ninja. It's like ninja mode.
Yeah.
Ninja mode.
It's a big deal. And I just, when going on family vacations, anytime there was a lit dock anywhere within foot range, I would go fish it. And same thing, I realized, like when I'd be sitting on the dock super quiet and somebody's walking down the dock towards me, even if they're 100, 200 feet away, them just the foot vibration on the dock, those fish will just push down. And in many cases, once they do that, they obviously know that there's some danger, and they're way less likely to eat when they know there's some danger around. But then again, just give it 5 minutes of quiet, of no noise, and no I guess nothing to spook them, and they'll pop right back up.
Yep. And as you said, I was using live shrimp, really small, little size one hook or 2 hook, pretty small, 30-pound leader, and just making those casts up current and letting it float back. And it was that was really fun. So that was the first spot, and we caught a ton there. Like, hey, let's go check out a completely different spot. And next we went to that bridge, caught a couple in that first light, remember? And same deal, just casting up current and letting it go. I was fishing more the top. You were fishing more mid because it was 12, 15 feet deep.
Yeah, that bridge was deeper, and so yeah, I just had to give. That's the cool thing about these little jigs, even with the 1/4 ounce jig head, and the fact that there's no really resistance. They can go down deep. So I just had to cast further up current, and so that by the time it hit the bottom, I wanted to hit bottom near the pilings. So I'd hit bottom and bounce it on the pilings, and if I timed it right, as far as the placement of the cast and then the retrieve, if it got near that piling, like near the piling on the bottom, it was off and getting smacked. And yeah, so that was the lit side, and then we went to the other side where the light was busted. The light wasn't working, and that's actually where the biggest one was caught. And biggest one goes to the lures, I'm pleased to report. And for that one, that was the deeper zone with a bunch of current hitting up onto it. So it was deep current hitting up against structure. So for that one, I actually moved. I think I have the rig here somewhere. Yeah, it's right here. So I moved to the bigger prawn because I had a 3/4 ounce weedless Haas Helix hook on it, or sorry, a weedless Haas hook on it. And that was the one that got thumped by the big one. See, that set up here. So yeah, 20-pound test, 30-pound leader, and I had a 40-pound bite tippet on it. This is just for the bigger fisher on bridges. And with this setup, this is the Prawn USA original on the weedless football jig head. And so that way I can get on the bottom, I can get near the structure, but as you can see, that hook point is up against the plastic so that I can bounce off the pilings without getting snagged. And that's the key for getting strikes. Those snook, and this is what Mad Snooker was saying, hey, like if that cast, when talking to Joe, that cast isn't right up against the dock, you're not going to catch snook. You'll be getting trout. And so if you can't get right close to that structure, the odds of getting some good fish are really small. And the problem with normal lures that aren't weedless, when you try to get next to a bridge piling with all that current flow moving around, it is extremely easy to get snagged and lose a lot of gear on the bridges. That was the biggest game changer for me over the last really 3 years. Once we started coming out with these weedless football jigs, just to be able to not get snagged every cast, it was a total game changer. And being able to get more aggressive with getting that lure right up against the structure where the fish are holding, game changer.
Yeah. If you do want to use lures, you nailed it. It's got to be close to that structure, and you got to practice casting. I mean, there's a reason that we keep talking about that over and over again. And every guide that we fish with, we asked Dave the same thing, like, what's the biggest issue? Like casting. He's like, there are so many nights where if I let my customers do all the casting, we wouldn't catch anything. He's like, so many times I have to make the cast for them and I'll let them do the rest. But it's so critical. And had there not been trout there in that first spot, and And had we not been able to see the fish with our own eyes, we just would have assumed, man, there's nothing here, right? If we'd only made this shorter cast, just so critical. What else were some other takeaways?
Yeah, I mean, it's just the fact that it's very different because you're at night and just everything's different when on the water. Even if you go to an area that you fish during the day all the time, going out at night is just a whole different experience. But once you get past the differences, like the similarities are way more vast, right? So like this spot, we went to maybe I don't know, 7 or 8 spots. And when we got to the good spot, just like day fishing, you get the good spot within a few minutes. You typically know, right? Like if we didn't get a bite in the first few minutes, we didn't really catch anything there. So and same for daytime fishing. And so I would say just use the same type of strategies where even if the spot looks perfect on my map, or if there's like an amazing looking light with a lot of current flow in a dock, and just the fish aren't active, if you're not seeing any action, you're not getting any strikes, then pick up and move, go to the next spot. Because once we pulled up to a good spot, like all the spots where we caught multiple fish, we knew it immediately that was going to be a good spot. Either we could see them on the surface, or we could hear them hitting in the darkness, or at least within the first few casts, we at least got some thumps, we at least got some bites.
And I don't know if you recall, but in every spot that we caught fish, including that big one, there was a bird. There was literally 2 birds on that very first dock. Remember, there was 2. There was a bird sitting up on that little bridge piling. There was one on both sides. Remember, there was a bird every single place that we caught fish, which is interesting. Same as the daytime.
Yeah, they were night herons. So the daytime, look for the egrets, and then really any bird's a good sign. But yeah, that's true. And same lures too. So like for the whole lure color discussion, though, that we hear that all the time, I didn't even bother changing colors. I just go with the trusty natural prawn. I didn't bother changing colors. If the fish are there, they're going to hit it. If they're not, I'm not going to get one anyhow. So keep it simple.
Yep. Another one on the stealth side was a headlamp. Yeah, I'm used to like, man, a headlamp, I'm going to use it to tie knots. And he's like, no, you have no light shining anywhere near the area we're fishing. Like turn your back, shine it somewhere else. But I mean, he's like every one of those, it's those little small things, right? That make someone like him great, where he can go out any night, even on a really tough night in general, and still get 20, 30, 40 fish in a boat. He was very careful. Not once did he let any light shine anywhere near where we were fishing. It just throws him off. Yeah, and his he was like even apologetic. Oh, sorry, there was a slow bite. Sorry. I was like, dude, like we just caught like 50 plus fish in a 3-hour span, which is a lot of fish for most people, including us. And he was like, that was like a really slow day for him. So when you do these small things right, this is what my point. He does all the small things right. He's literally been night fishing exclusively for a long time. He is the most dialed in night fishing I've ever seen. I thought I was pretty good, and I learned a ton from him. But when you do all those little small things right, you can absolutely catch a ton of fish, because those fish, again, are way less pressured. They're way more likely to eat. And as long as there aren't those mistakes that we all make, as long as those are made, it is game on out there. Yep. The other form of structure that I thought was interesting, because we've talked about it before on a podcast, when you and I do some diving underneath bridges, we use the phrase shadow lines. He was using that word, and we were fishing these shadow lines. Like, let's just say you have a bridge that's lit up, right? And you got light shining down from a bridge, and there's a shadow line there along the fenders. He's like, remember he even said it, that first cast I made, he's like, cast right above where it's still light, and let it just come back and just reel just the same. He's like, reel the exact same velocity as the tide is coming. So it's just natural. And it's like, as soon as it hits that shadow line, you're going to get a strike. And I did. And all the snook were just sitting right there waiting for that line of food to come their way. And they're all sabotaging it and attacking it right there in that shadow line.
Yeah, and one tip, this was a ninja tip I've never even thought of. So knowing that, the fish are positioned into the current flow, and as we were positioned down current from the shadow line that we were fishing at this one spot, basically right as that shadow line touched the dock, like touched this bridge, the snook were just loaded right there. And so, yeah, Joe would be casting over the shadow line. But the ninja trick was that he was extremely, I guess, directive in telling Joe, keep that rod tip up, and even straighten the line before that bait hits. Because if you don't do that, and this is like probably surely causes most fishermen, including me, because I've never really made a point to do this, to miss fish, to spook the fish before the bait gets to them. So when that fish is looking in and that lure hangs up, and if you let your line sink, that line is going to hit that fish before the bait gets to it, and that's obviously going to spook it off. But when you keep that line up, that keeps the line over the fish, so that by the time the bait gets to it, it hasn't been spooked off. And that was like, once that was dialed in, it was almost every cast was getting a strike. Like that was pretty, and we left them biting. Like we were like, it was getting late. We're like, hey man, like we've realized we have this dialed in. Let's go get some sleep. It was insane. I've never seen that many fish caught under a shadow line like that.
And it was to the point, if you're trying to visualize this, where it was uncomfortable for me. The rod tip, it felt like it was going straight north, like straight up to the moon. And at first I was kind of like just out there, like he's like, no, like you want this thing to be on top of the water. You want there to be no chance that line is going to hit them first. That's why you're reeling at the same speed that current's going. And that shrimp just probably like it would naturally, like it was just kind of going with the current. And boom, I mean, they'd come up and just smack that thing. That was really neat. And that's something I would have not known to ever do that.
Yeah. And that's another testament. Another reason why I like him right away. He said he's a mono guy and not fluoro. But for that exact reason, right? Fluoro sinks faster than mono. And so those of you using fluorocarbon, even though we preach against it all the time, that fluoro sinks, and that's going to more likely hit your target fish before it even sees your bait or your lure, on top of the fact that it's way less abrasive. So for anybody going after snook, I always recommend against fluoro. But yeah, he had a good, that was a really cool use case advantage on just traditional mono versus the way more expensive fluorocarbon.
Yep, agree.
Keep the fluoro in the tackle box when you're going night fishing.
Yep. Anything else you think of on that?
I think that covers it. Yeah, it was. We'll have a video coming out with some of the footage and some of the visual lessons on it. But yeah, just if you haven't tried night fishing, definitely give it a shot. And again, the cool thing about it is the same types of spots. Oftentimes, from my night fishing experience, it's typically the best stocks during the day are going to be really good at night, assuming they have some sort of light. And so there's a ton of overlap. There's definitely some nuances, but yeah, get out there, try it. And it's a ton of fun. Just get extra careful about being stealthy.
Yes. And we are, as I said earlier, having a course coming out here sooner than later. Peter Deeks is kind of wrapping up the final touches on it. And as I said, he's been filming with a videographer for quite some time in a bunch of different scenarios, different types of moon, different types of structure, different types of areas. So we got a lot of different areas, and he's even got a couple experts who kind of guys like the Mad Snooker that do a lot of night fishing that he's been interviewing and talking to. So it will be the most comprehensive course on night fishing, something you can never find out there on YouTube, and we'll have that available. Of course, if you're a VIP member, you'll get it automatically for free, and we will have it for purchases as well. So it'll hopefully be in the next 30 or so days from when this podcast gets launched. It'll be, I guess, Night Fishing Mastery is what it's called. So that'll be a good one. I learned a ton, and it is nice because that's something we do. Man, kids go to bed, our wife's asleep. You just want to go out there for a couple of, because we could have just ended after the first 30 minutes and it would have been epic. But we'd already made the long drive down there, and so yeah, I might as well stay for a few more hours. But yeah, I mean, you find that one good spot, and dude, I mean, that was crazy how many fish we caught in a short amount of time.
And again, for many years, I thought that you had to have live bait to do it, right? Which is takes more time, is more costly in most cases. Get good with one lure. This Prawn USA Junior, for example, and you can catch a ton of fish. I caught the most species. So that very first spot, Joe got 2 species total, trout and snook.
Yep.
With the jig, I got trout, snook, black drum, and mangrove snapper. So I had the more species and the biggest one. So the 100%, you do not have to have live bait to have success under lights. You just need to find a good spot. Number one, as we preach, the ladder, right? Ladder importance, find the good areas, position properly, know what depth they're at, and then deliver a bait or a lure to them as quietly as you can. And you're going to be catching a ton of fish.
And don't forget that Dr. Juice saltwater slam on that lure. Woo, woo. Gotta have that. Gotta have that scent. Pimp juice. Got my good ones. Cool. All right, guys. We'll stay tuned for that. And if you have any questions, let us know. We'll hopefully have this on YouTube and the blog post. And love to hear any questions you have on night fishing in general. And check out the Mad Snooker. We'll get him back on the podcast. We interviewed him quite some time ago now. And he's just entertaining guy, a wealth of knowledge. I mean, he's probably caught more snook than maybe anyone living. I mean, it's certainly up there, top 5 for sure.
I wouldn't be surprised. He has the passion for fishing, and he focuses on the best bite for snook. They have those big eyes for a reason. They're designed to feed at night, and that's when he's going after him. And he's looking at his Facebook feed, and he is constantly on a bunch of fish.
Yes, it is. It is pretty cool. So appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to you on the next episode. Peace.
Want more fishing tips, shortcuts, and tools so you can catch more fish per trip? Then head over to saltstrong.com now and join the movement. Tight lines, and thanks for listening.